I didn't mean for it to feel like this. When I opened the door that first evening, rain still sliding down his jacket, his breath caught somewhere between gratitude and awe, I was only thinking about the rent. The spare room had been empty for months, and silence, no matter how peaceful it pretends to be, starts to echo after a while. He was younger than I expected. 23, maybe 24. The kind of youth that carries itself like it's trying not to be noticed, but can't help radiating something. Unguarded, hungry, alive. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. My voice came out steadier than I felt. The apartment felt suddenly too intimate, too aware of itself. The scent of candle wax, the low jazz still humming from the speakers, the faint trace of my perfume that always clings to the air no matter how many windows I open. He looked around, taking it all in. "It's beautiful." I told him it wasn't much, that it was quiet, that I worked a lot and wouldn't be in his way. Lies in their own way. I wanted to say don't touch anything, but I also wanted to know what it would feel like if he did. He smiled then. Small, cautious. The kind of smile that belongs to someone still learning how much space he's allowed to take up in the world. That was the beginning. By the end of the first week, I'd memorized the sounds of him. The click of the door at 7:15 when he left for his classes. The kettle at 8:02. The way his voice softened when he talked on the phone late at night. Low, careful, as if he didn't want me to hear, but secretly didn't mind if I did. He was polite, almost too much so. Called me ma'am once and I laughed too sharply. "Don't," I said. "You make me sound like a teacher about to hand out detention." His mouth curved, hesitant. "What should I call you then?" I told him my name, just that. But when he said it, slow, deliberate, almost reverent, it sounded like something else entirely. There's something cruel about the way attraction begins. It's not loud. It's not sudden. It's a whisper you pretend not to hear at first. The lingering second of eye contact. The awareness of his presence before he even enters the room. I caught myself watching him too often. When he cooked, sleeves rolled to his elbows. When he leaned against the counter reading. When his hair fell into his eyes and he brushed it back with the kind of careless grace you can't learn. And he noticed. Of course he did. One evening I came home late, tired, damp from the rain, wishing only for solitude. But he was in the kitchen, barefoot, stirring something in a pan that smelled like garlic and butter. "You didn't eat yet, did you?" he asked. I shook my head. "Then sit," he said, with the quiet confidence of someone forgetting who's supposed to have authority here. I almost corrected him. Almost reminded him whose apartment this was, but instead I sat in and watched him move. The rhythm of his motions, unself-conscious but deliberate, stirred something that had been asleep in me for too long. When he placed the plate in front of me, I said, "You don't have to do this." "I wanted to," he replied simply. Our fingers brushed when I took the fork. A spark, immediate and uninvited. I looked up, and his eyes held mine for a second too long. Something in the air shifted. Soft, electric. Neither of us spoke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard him moving in his room, the faint sound of music through the wall, a chair scraping, his voice murmuring along to a song I couldn't place. It was intimate, in a way that felt almost indecent, to listen, to imagine. I turned over, pressed my palm against the cool sheet beside me, and thought about the way he'd looked at me earlier, like he was trying to memorize something he had no right to touch. I told myself it was harmless. That I was older, wiser, immune. But the next morning, when I walked into the kitchen and found him shirtless, making coffee, the lie dissolved instantly. He froze when he saw me. "Sorry," he murmured, reaching for his t-shirt. "Don't," I said, too quickly, too instinctively. Then softer. "It's fine." His gaze flickered. Surprise, confusion, something warmer. We didn't speak after that, but when I left for work, I felt his eyes on me, following me to the door. Days blurred. The tension became a living thing, quiet but pulsing. We circled each other like gravity had rules neither of us understood but couldn't resist obeying. He began staying up later, waiting for me to come home. Sometimes he'd pretend it was coincidence, a question about bills, the mail, the Wi-Fi, but I knew. And sometimes I'd linger too, asking about his studies, about his plans, about the small, ordinary things that gave me an excuse to listen to his voice longer. One evening, he sat across from me on the couch, sketchbook in his lap. "You draw?" I asked. He nodded. "Mostly faces. I like trying to catch what people don't say." I smiled. "And what do you think I don't say?" He looked up then, really looked. And I felt the world tilt slightly. "That you're lonely," he said softly. The words landed like a touch. I didn't move, didn't breathe. He looked like he regretted saying it but didn't take it back. "And you?" I asked. "What don't you say?" He closed the sketchbook, eyes steady. "That I notice things I shouldn't." The silence after that felt dangerous. The next few days, I tried to reclaim the distance I'd lost. Spoke less, smiled less, locked my door at night, but it was useless. The awareness had already settled beneath my skin. One night, a storm cut the power. The apartment went dark, except for the silver light filtering through the windows. He knocked softly. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, but he came in anyway, holding a candle that flickered against the walls. "You shouldn't wander in the dark," I murmured. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't either." The shadows danced across his face, making him look older, sharper. The silence stretched until it trembled. "I'll leave the candle," he said finally, setting it down. But he didn't move. For a moment we just stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath, close enough for the air to hum between us. Then a thunderclap broke the spell. He stepped back, almost stumbling, and the moment shattered. "Good night," I whispered. He paused at the door, voice low. "Good night, ma'am." The word was deliberate this time, a test, a provocation. And I felt it, deep, dangerous, real. That was the night I realized this was no longer harmless. The morning after the storm, I avoided him. It wasn't deliberate at first. I told myself I was simply busy, buried in deadlines and the steady rhythm of work. But every quiet hour, every echo in the apartment, felt louder with him in it. Something had shifted between us that night. It was subtle, invisible almost. But once you've crossed a line, even in silence, there's no going back. I'd catch him looking at me differently now. Not with curiosity, but with intent, as if he'd seen something in me he shouldn't have, and wanted to see it again. And worse, I wanted him to. It began with little things. He started making coffee for two. Always black the way I drank it. I started leaving the living room lights dimmer than usual, as if the dark could hide how aware I was of him. One evening, I came home early and found him sitting on the balcony reading. The sunset painted everything in gold, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. "You're home early," he said without looking up. "I could say the same," I replied. He smiled. That quiet, knowing smile that had started to unnerve me. Classes were canceled, so I thought I'd enjoy the view. I leaned on the railing beside him, careful to keep distance. "You mean the city?" He glanced at me. That too. The words were nothing, harmless on paper, but spoken in that calm, unshaken tone. They felt like a touch. There's a kind of intimacy that doesn't need contact. It's the way silence stretches between two people when neither is pretending anymore. That was us, a slow unraveling. He began asking questions that felt too personal. About my marriage, my work, my solitude. I told him fragments, never the whole truth, but enough for him to see the cracks. "You don't let people close easily, do you?" He asked once. "Not anymore. Why?" I took a breath. "Because people always want more than they deserve." He looked at me, eyes steady. "Maybe you just gave to the wrong ones." It was the kind of sentence that lingered long after he left the room. Weeks passed, and the pull between us grew impossible to ignore. Sometimes, It was in the way our eyes met over dinner, the seconds too long, the air too still. Other times it was in the accidental touches, the brush of his hand when passing me a cup, the warmth of his shoulder when we both reached for the same drawer. Each moment small enough to deny, but too charged to forget. One night, I found him sketching again, only this time. The page wasn't empty. I saw myself there, half finished in charcoal. My hair tied loosely, the lines of my face softened by shadow. It wasn't flattering. It was honest. "You drew me," I said quietly. He didn't flinch. I couldn't not. My voice felt strange when I spoke. "You should have asked." He set the pencil down, meeting my eyes. "Would you have said yes?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. The air between us tightened. For a moment, I thought he might step closer, that we'd finally stop pretending this wasn't happening. But instead, he exhaled softly, like surrender disguised as restraint. "You make it very hard to behave." And then he left the room. I sat there long after, staring at the sketch, at myself as he saw me. Not distant or untouchable, just a woman, seen, desired, real. After that, I began to notice how easily he slipped into my world. He knew my favorite wine, the exact playlist I worked to, the way I liked my windows open even in winter. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel both comforted and exposed. One evening, I found him fixing a cabinet door that had been loose for months. "You didn't have to," I said. "I wanted to help." "You keep saying that," I murmured. "Why?" He looked up, smiling faintly. "Because I like doing things for you." The way he said it, quiet, almost reverent, felt like something neither of us should touch. Before I could respond, my phone rang. A colleague reminding me of a meeting I'd forgotten. When I hung up, he was still watching me, that steady gaze that saw too much. "You're always so composed," he said. "Do you ever let anyone see you undone?" The question lingered, intimate and dangerous. "Don't," I whispered. "You don't know what you're asking." He took a small step forward. "Then tell me." I should have stopped it there. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I wanted someone to ask. The next few days blurred. Tension threaded into every glance, every word. When we spoke, it was softer now, closer. He'd ask about the smallest things, what I dreamed about, what I missed most, what I feared, and slowly, I began to answer. There's something terrifying about being known, not just looked at, but seen. It makes you ache in places you thought were numb. He'd listen, really listen, and then say things like, "You don't have to hold everything together all the time." And I'd laugh it off, but part of me wanted to believe him. One night I couldn't sleep again. I found myself standing by the living room window, the city lights flickering below. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt it, the quiet shift in the air when he entered the room. "You should be asleep," I said softly. "So should you," he replied. I turned. He stood a few steps away, hair tousled, wearing the same gray t-shirt he always did. We didn't move. The silence between us was thick, a heartbeat, a breath, a decision waiting to happen. "You're playing with fire," I whispered. He smiled faintly, then tell me to stop. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come, because I didn't want him to. The space between us dissolved, not with a touch, but with everything that lived in that moment, the want, the fear, the surrender. I closed my eyes, and for the first time I didn't run from it. After that, something changed. We didn't cross lines, not in the way people might assume, but we didn't need to. Every conversation, every look, every quiet breath between us was the line. He'd make coffee in the morning, leave one cup outside my door. I'd find small notes on the counter, simple things. Take a break. Eat something. Don't forget to breathe. It was tenderness wrapped in restraint, and maybe that's why it hurt so much. Because it was real. One evening, as I was leaving for work, he stopped me at the door. "You're scared of this," he said quietly. "I should be." He nodded. Maybe, but I'm not. You don't understand, I said. You're young. You think this is some kind of story that ends neatly. It doesn't. He took a step closer, eyes steady. Maybe not. But that doesn't mean it isn't real. I felt my throat tighten. You shouldn't say things like that. Then stop giving me reasons to. His words landed like a truth I'd been avoiding. Because he was right. I had been giving him reasons. Every look. Every silence. Every time I didn't tell him to stop. Later that night, I found another sketch on the table. It wasn't of me this time. It was of us, two figures, close but not touching, standing in the glow of a single candle. The same night the storm cut the power, he'd captured it perfectly. The distance, the pull, the ache of everything unspoken. At the bottom, in small handwriting, he'd written, "You're the calm I never knew I wanted." I sat there for a long time, tracing the lines of the drawing with my fingertips, and for the first time, I admitted it, quietly, to the empty room. I wanted him too, not because he was young, not because he looked at me like I was something extraordinary, but because he saw me when I'd stopped believing anyone could. And maybe that was enough. That night, before I went to bed, I left my door unlocked. Not as an invitation, but as an admission that I was done pretending. That some surrenders don't come from weakness, but from finally allowing yourself to feel alive again. Morning came softly, but it felt different. The air in the apartment had changed, heavier somehow, full of everything we hadn't said but both understood. He didn't knock that night. He didn't have to. Nothing happened, not in the way stories like to pretend. But something had settled quietly between us, real and irreversible. He'd seen the unlocked door. He'd seen me, and that was enough. For a while we lived in that quiet understanding. The world outside continued. People came and went. Bills arrived, dishes piled up. But beneath all the ordinary things, something extraordinary hummed, steady and unspoken. He'd move around the apartment like a soft rhythm I'd grown used to. The sound of his laughter from the kitchen. The way he hummed when he worked. The lightness he carried even when the air between us felt fragile. It should have been peaceful. But peace doesn't come without a cost. The first fracture came from outside. A friend of mine, an old colleague, dropping by unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon. I hadn't seen her in months. She was all bright lipstick and louder opinions. The kind of woman who noticed everything. When she saw him, barefoot, hair mussed, pouring 2 cups of coffee, her eyebrows lifted, amusement flickering across her face. "Oh," she said lightly. "So this is your tenant." I smiled too quickly. "Yes, he rents the spare room." "Uh-huh," she said, her eyes sharp. "Nice to see you finally got company around here." The air tightened. He handed me my cup with quiet composure, but his jaw was set, his expression unreadable. After she left, I turned to him. "You shouldn't have been here when—" He cut me off gently. "You're embarrassed." "It's not that," I said too fast. "Yes, it is." He wasn't angry. Just hurt. The kind of hurt that doesn't need raised voices to be loud. I took a breath. "People wouldn't understand." He nodded slowly. "You mean they'd judge you?" "Yes." "And that matters to you more than this?" The words sank like stones. I didn't answer. He exhaled, setting the cup down with careful restraint. "I don't want to be your secret." Then he walked away. The apartment felt different after that. Too quiet, too clean. He still lived there, technically, but everything between us had retreated into silence. We spoke in practicalities, bills, chores, groceries. And yet, every time I caught his reflection in the window, my chest tightened. I told myself it was for the best, that I was protecting both of us from something that couldn't last. But late at night, I'd hear him moving in his room, restless, and I'd feel the ache of what I'd pushed away. A week passed before I finally broke the silence. He was on the balcony again, sketchbook open, the city flickering below us. "Are you going to keep pretending I don't exist?" I asked quietly. He didn't look up. "You're the one pretending." The wind tugged at my hair. "You're angry?" "I'm disappointed," he said simply. Because for a moment, I thought you saw what I saw. And what's that? He looked up then, eyes steady and fierce. That it's not about age. It's not about what people think. It's about the fact that when I'm around you, I finally feel like I'm home. My throat tightened. You're too young to talk about forever. Maybe. But you're too scared to talk about now. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Then don't do anything, he said. Just stop running. That night I didn't sleep. His words looped through my mind, quiet but relentless. Stop running. I thought about all the years I'd spent keeping walls around me. Years of being admired but never known, desired but never understood. He'd seen past all of that, and I'd punished him for it. By morning, I knew what I had to do. He was in the kitchen, back turned, making coffee. For once, I didn't hide behind distance. I'm sorry, I said. He froze, hand on the mug. For what? For making you feel small just because I was afraid. He turned, eyes searching mine. And now? Now I'm still afraid, I said softly. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe alone. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he smiled, slow, careful, like he didn't trust the hope in it yet. He stepped closer, close enough for our breaths to meet, but still leaving space. Always space. I don't want to ruin your life, he said quietly. I shook my head. You're the only thing that's made it feel like one again. The truth sat between us. Simple, raw, real. We didn't need grand declarations after that. There was no cinematic kiss, no dramatic confession. Just small moments of choosing each other. Again and again. We learned how to exist in the quiet. He'd draw while I worked beside him. We'd share meals, laughter, silence that no longer felt heavy. Sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me with that same reverent gaze from the night he moved in. And instead of flinching, I'd meet it, and somewhere along the way, the world outside stopped mattering. But the world has a way of intruding. A letter came. A notice from the Landlord Association. A reminder that technically, subletting was against policy. He found it first. So this is it? He asked. Do I need to leave? The thought hit me harder than I expected. No, I said instantly. We'll figure it out. He smiled faintly. You mean you'll figure it out? You always do. Not this time, I said. We'll do it together. And for the first time, I meant it. Spring came quietly. The days grew longer, the light softer. We fell into a rhythm. Not secret, not forbidden, just ours. We'd walk through the neighborhood on weekends, never hand in hand, but close enough that it didn't matter. Sometimes people looked. Sometimes they whispered. But I stopped caring. Because love, real love, isn't about the years between two people. It's about the life they build in the space between their fears. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, he handed me something. A small, framed sketch. It was of me again. Older, softer, peaceful. Not a woman holding everything together, just a woman being. At the bottom, in his familiar handwriting, he'd written, "You stopped running." I laughed through the tears. You're still too good with words, he smiled. You taught me how. Now sometimes I catch him calling me his, half teasing, half serious. It used to make me flinch. Now it makes me smile, because it's not ownership he means. It's belonging. And in a world that's always told me to keep my distance, belonging feels like rebellion. We're not perfect. We argue. We misread each other. We make mistakes. But when the morning light spills across the floor and I hear his laughter from the kitchen, I know I wouldn't trade any of it. He moved in as my tenant. And somewhere between silence and surrender, he became my home. The city outside keeps moving, fast, unbothered. But inside these walls, time slows. There's coffee cooling on the table, sunlight through the curtains, and his hand brushing mine without hesitation. And for the first time in years, I'm not hiding, I'm not pretending, I'm here. In this moment, in this love, in this fragile, Beautiful truth we built from everything we weren't supposed to feel. He looks at me, eyes full of quiet certainty, and says, "You're mine." I smile, shaking my head just enough to tease. Maybe, but only because I choose to be. Outside, the world hums on. Inside, we stand in the golden light, laughter soft between us, a love not perfect but steady, and in that stillness, I finally understand. Some endings aren't endings at all. They're beginnings we were brave enough to claim. If you've ever loved someone you weren't supposed to, if you've ever felt the pull between control and surrender, between what's right and what feels real, this story is for you. Comment and subscribe for more stories like this. From tension to surrender, to the love that defied the rules. Tell me, would you risk everything for a love that finally feels like home?